When I was 9 years old, I was walking with a relative through a marketplace and I saw a guy who was crying by the side of the road and he had had a burning tire put around his neck because his people had found out that he was a gay man.
This is Chaps Out, where I talk to men about coming out later in life. My guest today is Alex, who grew up between the UK and Nigeria in a deeply religious family.
So it's quite interesting, Grant. I have a very close friend who's also a gay man, and he said, as far as he's concerned, you officially come out once you come out to your parents. So that was at the age of 29, but I had been coming out. The first person I came out to was my former girlfriend, my only girlfriend, when I was 26. And then I came out to a younger sibling at 27, and then to my parents at 29, and then to the rest of my extended family gradually from there on, from my early 30s onwards.
Mm.
I grew up very Roman Catholic and had internalized a lot of homophobia, not just from living in Nigeria, but also from the homophobia here that was quite prevalent in the 1990s when I was coming of age. There was a lot of pressure on me to get married to a woman and to have children by the time I turned about 25. And I just decided it was time to share my truth. And well, if I am going to get married, it would be to a male partner because those were the relationships I'd had that felt right for me. With my only girlfriend, I loved her, but I wasn't in love with her. Yeah, so what should have been a happy coming out was quite traumatic for my family. And it's a shame that it couldn't have been a celebration like it is in the TV shows. Back in the time when I might have come out earlier, it was seen as something sad, and a lot of my relatives had already married by that age or had had children or were in committed relationships, and I wasn't.
So when you moved back to Nigeria, it's a very different sort of culture over there, the acceptance in Nigeria.
Or lack of acceptance. There's a anti-gay law that it's put in place. They've criminalized same-sex relationships and sexual activity, and it's a law that is not always implemented depending on your status. So it's a case of most of the people that I've known in Nigeria, that I've known from a Nigerian background, are in the closet. And that's not for me to judge. I just wish that we could live in a world where people could be safe and free to come out because I don't judge anyone who's closeted negatively. And I've come across a few people in the gay scene that have been quite judgmental about it, sort of saying, oh, that homophobia will never end if we stay in the closet, but people prioritize their safety.
Yeah. And
Mhm.
to hear how you could just be shot by police if they knew that you were gay or lesbian or whatever, right?
When I was 9 years old, I was walking with a relative through a marketplace and I saw a guy who was crying by the side of the road and he had had a burning tire put around his neck because his people had found out that he was a gay man. And that put the fear of God in me.
Mm.
And, I became very paranoid about what my family's reaction would be once I started to realize I was gay myself around that age. But I didn't really accept it until I was 25. So it was a long time to be in denial. Remember when I came back to the UK at 12 and I started secondary school, there was a guy that was very flamboyantly, openly gay, very camp, and embraced his identity. I mean, he must have faced homophobia, but I would never have discussed it with him. And I just felt not envious, but sort of I wish I could have been that confident
Mm.
in embracing my own identity and my own campness and my own as I am now.
Mm.
But it took a longer time to get there. A lot of people will say that it's coming from Nigeria, that it's being Roman Catholic, but I remember there was a lot of homophobia at my school. When we were in sixth form, when we were doing media studies, a teacher saying that her problem with shows such as Queer as Folk is that they portray being gay as the norm and that it's not the norm. Now that made a huge impression on me.
Yeah.
It was very damaging, and I had a classmate try to out me in front of the whole class. So yeah, I had a lot of challenges preventing me because I think when I first met other gay men on the gay scene, they couldn't understand why I was so insecure about my sexual identity and I didn't know how to voice all the trauma that had happened. that pushed me deeper and deeper into self-hate and self-loathing, and that manifested in major depressive disorder and anxiety. There were other sources of it, but that led to me developing mental health problems.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that. You're doing okay though now, right? In fact, that's why you work in helping other people.
That's right. My first job in peer support, paid job, was working in the psychiatric hospital where I had been a patient. So that was a really full circle moment for me. I am doing a lot better in my mental health now. I remember it was quite liberating, a therapist saying, I just want you to know in this space you can say anything about your sexuality and you won't be judged as you've been before.
Mm.
So that was very powerful. That was 2015, so when I was 31. Yeah.
So when did you start to come out of the closet, even, even if it's just to some close friends or strangers or whatever? What sort of age were you when you started to do that?
Once I told my younger sibling, then I told some other relatives as a sort
Mm,
of test ground towards telling my parents. I sort of did it gradually with people's various reactions. It was mainly supportive from the relatives I chose to tell.
mm,
Not from all, but from the majority. And I then was all out. I would mention it very early in conversations to people I just met and just embraced it, was just able to be free finally after years of holding back and, pretending to be interested in that way in the
mm.
opposite gender and, being one of the lads and, something I'm not. Yeah, so it was my late 20s when I reached that stage, which is considered late in the UK, but in Nigeria, where I originate from on my father's side, to come out at all is, monumental in the context of, people don't want you to come out, everyone will judge you, you'll be
Mm.
isolated, you'll be excommunicated. I don't know many people who live in Nigeria who have come out. Most of them that have then went abroad.
Are we able to talk about your mental health trouble and how it sort of manifested? And I guess that is definitely a lot to do with you being in the closet and the pressures of your, of growing up, trying to keep things to yourself.
Yeah, there was that. That definitely manifested in depression and anxiety. Generalized anxiety disorder was a specific diagnosis that I got. And actually, what led me to get to psychiatric hospital was psychosis, and was in and out of A&E 4 times before they finally admitted me.
Mm,
And I completely deteriorated. That was in 2018. And then I had a relapse of psychosis in 2020 and was well supported by my partner at the time and by friends and by my family to get through it. And
mm,
my younger sibling, who I came out to first in the family, remembered when I was on the phone to them during my relapse of psychosis, saying to them, I want to get better. I want to break this cycle. I don't want to be admitted to hospital anymore.
mm,
And that was the first step in my recovery. And I've been out of hospital as a patient for 6 years because, it was stressful. It was stressful my first male partner, I was closeted and he was very understanding and everything and didn't put any pressure on me to come out, understood that it was personal. But there were some other guys I'd met that would lecture me about why I needed to come out without knowing my history and without knowing everything that I carried
mm,
within that. And definitely it played an impact on my deteriorating mental health.
mm.
Coming out restored my mental health because, yes, I went on to have mental health problems, but as I've said, it was complex. And, you know, um, at least I didn't have to worry about being out when I was going through psychosis and everything.
So what was the reaction from your family, your parents, when you came out to them?
My parents found it very difficult, and one of them is no longer alive. But the one that's no longer alive became affirming towards the end and said, at the time Ireland had a gay prime minister and said, oh, the prime minister of Ireland is gay. You can be anything in the world that you want, son. And that was wonderful to hear and showed how far my parent had come and that it is about unconditional love. And I don't judge my parents' reaction at all because it's in the context, especially my Nigerian parents, of where they're from
Mm.
and how other people will react towards it. And so far, I'm the only member of my family who's come out and made it public as well. But the majority of my family have been accepting and supportive. And I was discussing with one relative about me being gay quite recently, and they said that they sort of suspected, which I think was the majority of my relatives, but that they felt how lonely it would have been for me being in that situation with no one to talk to when I was younger.
Yeah.
My older relatives are like, don't ask, don't tell.
Mm.
And my younger relatives are like, this is just who he is. And the younger ones have been all accepting so far. I've made friends in the African community that have said, oh, that that since I had a girlfriend before, I should reconsider it. And that, if I found a lady who'd understand and all of that. So it's a shame that that's still there in
Mm.
2026, but I'm an easygoing person and I just, speak my truth, which is that,
Mm.
it's not for me to judge anyone that goes into that situation, but it's not for me
Mm.
because I couldn't live with lying to somebody or preventing them from finding a relationship that would be more fulfilling for them.
Mm.
And then I want my own fulfilling relationship as well. So,
Of
yeah.
course. Yeah. You want to be happy, and you are happy.
On the whole, I still struggle with my mental health at times, but I've really turned a corner through homeopathic psychiatry. I've gone from being in a church, it was a Pentecostal church, it was black majority, where I was there very briefly. And I remember the African American preacher mocking gay people and everybody laughing.
Oh.
And this was part of the sermon. The discomfort I felt has been unmatched. I said nothing, and that has
Mm.
stayed with me. I should have
Mm.
walked out. I wouldn't stay now. But, I was
No.
trying to be something I wasn't.
Mm.
And now I'm in a church that is inclusive, that does things like has services for Transgender Remembrance Day, that, support me as an openly gay man.
Mm.
I've really turned a corner and
Yeah.
gone from living quite a sad life to one where I feel embraced and I feel protected. Well, I did leave not long after that. There was, I apologize to anyone where this is triggering, but I remember there was a book that they were selling called How to Raise Your Child Not to Be Homosexual. And that was a nail in the coffin. I was not out at the time, but even if I had not been a gay man, I just, knowing how I am and the values I carry, I could not be in that environment where that was considered the norm, and then somebody being openly gay is considered what to preach against and what to humiliate somebody for. It was just so unkind. It was not a Christian environment to me.
Mm.
To me, a Christian environment should be loving, should be universal, that people of other faiths
Mm.
can, observe the rituals and our practice and feel welcome, not where you're preaching against their religion and just trying to shame people and trying to embarrass people
Yeah.
and force people to convert. Conversion therapy is still a thing
Hmm.
over the world. It's now banned here. Well, it's banned for gay people. It's still practiced in different forms. It might not be, formalized. I still know of people from my Nigerian community and other parts of the African community that are scared to come out. That shouldn't happen anymore, but it still does. And that's why I do things like this podcast to say that I understand and I've been there and I know that it's a lonely road to walk, but it's worth getting there because you get liberated. You don't carry the baggage of, feeling shame, most
Mm.
importantly.
Mm. You've done really well to get where you are. That's amazing. And
Thank you. I really
yeah.
appreciate that.
Hi, Grant here. Sorry to interrupt your listening pleasure of Chaps Out. If you are enjoying the podcast, then please follow, like, rate, or review. That really, really helps the algorithm get the podcast to the ears and eyes of anyone who may need to hear it. So thank you very much. And now back to the podcast. So, have you got any advice for people coming from your community? I'm talking about like Nigerian background, really. If there's anything you might want to say to anyone who is afraid or scared, if they're thinking of coming out or considering not coming out and just staying in the closet, is there anything you might want to pass on to them?
Yes, thank you for the great question. I would say self-acceptance is paramount. You have to accept yourself and you have to do what works for you. I remember speaking to another gay man on the scene and I was closeted at the time and I was really distressed about it. And he said, well, maybe now is not the right time to come out and you will find the right time. And I did. It was when I was prepared for the challenges that came out of coming out. So you have to be in a strong place, especially coming from a Nigerian background. Safety is paramount. So you have to assure your own safety. And remember what it says in the Bible if you are a Christian, that you are made in God's image and that you are loved unconditionally. So extend that love to yourself. You know, it's important to not always be in your head. I found that's why I developed mental health problems. I was overthinking and, you know, having more stability in my life through having a regular job and healthy friendships and more open communication with my family has led me to this place where I can say, yeah, I'm doing well and, you know, I'm in a position where I can help others, which is fantastic.
Well done.
And to you as well for this podcast.
Well, yes, I do enjoy it. It's really interesting to meet so many different people from different backgrounds. So fair to say that you're glad that you came out.
Oh, definitely. It empowered me. It is empowering. And although it wasn't easy with my family's reaction, I was liberated and I was able to embrace myself and to not have to hide who I was and to pretend to be something I wasn't as I had been before. You know, I was masking and a lot. I was masking the autism, the ADHD, my
Mm.
sexuality. And so it's no wonder when I look back that I couldn't sleep at night.
So yeah, well done to be where you are. You've done very
Oh,
well.
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. So have you. It's not easy coming out as autistic and ADHD later either, not having the awareness early on and so forth. So,
Yeah. So I think we're probably done here, Alex, but it's been absolutely wonderful talking to you today and really appreciate you sharing so much of your story, which is obviously, yeah, it's been tough at times, but I'm really glad to see where you are now. And yeah, it's very, very good of you to come on and really hope it helps someone else who might be going through something similar. But before you do go, can you just give me a little tease of what you're going to talk about in the companion podcast, Chaps Out Culture?
yeah, thank you so much for this opportunity. It's been really great talking to you. And I echo what you say that, you know, I just want people listening to this that relate to know that they're not alone and that
Mm,
the one thing that we all possess in life, the only thing that's guaranteed in life is hope.
mm,
So I will be talking about in the next podcast a film called Wildhood, a Canadian queer movie from 2021,
mhm.
and two other shows from way back that were influential on my coming out journey.
Fantastic. Oh, well, well done. And thank you so much for coming on. Love to see you.
Thank you. Thank you, Grant. God bless.
Thanks again for listening to Chaps Out and to Alex for coming on to share his story. Alex showed us that coming out isn't always straightforward, especially when you're navigating strong faith, cultural expectations, and family pressures, but that it's still possible to find your way through it. Sometimes you have to wait and find the right time to come out, and when he did, was prepared for the challenges he faced. As he said, you have to accept yourself and you have to do what works for you, and that safety is paramount, particularly when fear has been part of your upbringing. But despite everything, Alex's message is one of hope, that it's worth getting there because you get liberated. You don't carry the baggage, you're free. If this conversation resonated with you, remember, you are not alone. Please subscribe to Chaps Out wherever you listen so you never miss an episode, along with episodes of our companion podcast, Chaps Out Culture. And please follow or subscribe on YouTube, TikTok and Instagram. If you can like, rate and review, and give us a share, it really helps the podcast get noticed and reach the people who may need to hear it. If you like what we're doing, you can donate on the link in the bio. Your support will help with running costs and keep these conversations flowing. And if you're a man who grew up in the UK or Ireland and came out as bisexual or gay later in life and have an inspiring story you'd like to share on the podcast, then please email me at chapsoutpod@gmail.com. Thanks again for listening and your support, and take care.